Hi, my name's Nick, um, and this is my COVID Survivors Project video. Um, so I am unsure of exactly how I contracted COVID, but it's quite likely that it either came from my flatmates or from the school that I work at. I started getting symptoms about a week after lockdown. I'm a primary school teacher. Um, My symptoms at first, I wasn't really sure about. I had mild dizziness, mild headaches. I'd be getting out of the shower and I'd feel a little bit woozy just for a few seconds. And it was a bit strange. And it obviously passed through my mind, but obviously I was hearing stories of people having far more serious symptoms. And also, I didn't have the cough either, which at the time we all thought was like kind of the number one symptom back near the start. Um, what then changed is that my flatmate then went down with COVID very clearly, very obviously. Breathing difficulties, respiratory issues. We had to call paramedics. And she had had a cough that then devolved very quickly into this. At that point, it then became far more likely that my symptoms had been COVID. Um, and then after my flatmate had had her very serious symptoms for maybe a few days or so, I suddenly developed a cough. We thought, here we go. And then the cough became fever, which was quite a bad fever. Ultimately, though, I feel very, very fortunate. When I say a very bad fever, it was manageable with paracetamols. Not only that, but ultimately, the worst of it lasted 2 or 3 days. It came with renewed headaches, but worse than before, and dizziness, but worse than before. So essentially, at its worst, my symptoms were fever, dizziness, and headaches with a cough. But that lasted for no more than a few days, and then I recovered very quickly. I felt guilty almost about how quickly I recovered, how quickly I got over it, um, because my flatmate was very much worse off than that. For probably at least 3 weeks with the worst symptoms. And hers were lung based, so it was making life very, very unpleasant for her. Um, so I guess my COVID experience is less really my own and more sort of that um, kind of feeling of waking up every day and we share a working space. We agreed right from the get go that if one of us was to contract COVID, we lived together in the same space. No one's going to be locked in their room for that time. But it's not fair. We both use the living spaces, so we work together, kind of at a kitchen table most days. And my experience was every morning waking up and really, really hoping that my flatmate's symptoms had abated somewhat. And every morning I'd go in, how are you feeling? And the same kind of shake of the head. Um, at one point, she had to go back into hospital again just to kind of check that she wasn't, developing more severe symptoms such as pneumonia. And so it was a very worrying time. It was a very worrying time. I think she was very scared. I was obviously quite, worried for her, very worried for her. Um, and yeah, it was quite crazy, particularly because at the beginning we had kind of not even joked, but we had even said, "Oh God, hope I get this quick. Hope I get it." Such a ease off your mind once you've got it. Get on with your life. And to a certain extent, now that it's been in past, that is true. I'm glad that I got it. Whether or not she would feel the same now, probably not. Um, I think the rest of kind of my COVID experience is very similar to everyone else's. Lockdown, what that did sort of mentally. Um, and there was a period at which I was in a good routine. I got myself working from home. I'm working a lot from home as a teacher, so monitoring kids, making sure that there's work to do. And so I still had a lot to do. And that was good. When we then went on what was the half-term holiday and I didn't have to set that work every day, it actually felt a lot worse because I was locked down at home without that routine. I didn't have anything to sort of get me up at that certain point every morning. And that was a lot harder for my mental well-being. And I think still is on days perhaps that I'm not going into work. Although now that schools are back open, I am actually in 4 days a week. Um, I think looking at looking at some of the prompt questions, um, my support network was probably similar to my flatmates. So I think we were probably very much each other's support network. But I certainly didn't need the physical support network in terms of my symptoms. But I think emotionally, I'm very glad I didn't live alone. Very, very glad. I haven't been through lockdown by myself. That there's, every morning there's been someone there, as I'm having my breakfast, having my coffee, getting on with some work. Every evening, someone to sit down, watch a film with. And I'm really glad that's been the case. Um, whether my experience has changed my outlook on the world, um, I mean, I already knew people were morons. Cements that, I guess. Um, I guess you think a bit about how your own behavior is affected by people's perception of you. And certainly I've been, quite good at keeping lockdown measures. Um, certainly better than a lot of people. I've, for the most part, very much followed the guidelines. One or two minor exceptions later on down the road, more recently. Um, yeah, post Cummings, we should say. I think a big part of that is the guilt of how the guilt that I would experience knowing what my family went through. And perhaps that has very much witnessing that has probably very much kept me on the straight and narrow, and even kind of encouraged me to sort of gently persuade others who I know who may not fully understand the importance of keeping to the guidance. But yeah, I think like all of us, I'm still finding kind of my way through it in this new sort of post-COVID world. Um, what does it mean for different things? What does it mean for dating? What does it mean for socializing? What does it mean for work? Um, and I don't think many of us have answers to those questions yet. So with that, it's as somebody who already suffered through sort of depression and anxiety, it's nice to not be alone in that. It's a collective global anxiety that we're all going through. But I think I don't know whether or not it's changed me in any way. I don't think it has. But I guess it's the kind of thing that maybe you'll only know looking back later. In terms of, do I have any thoughts on how your experience of COVID may or may not have been impacted by your government's response to the pandemic? Yeah, I think I'd already mentioned. Two was Dominic Cummings. I think that was probably the watershed moment, at which point people just thought, do what we want. And I think it changed a lot of people's mentalities and made a lot of people perhaps relax their stance slightly. Anyway, deep, meaningful comment to sign off.